They treated her like trash until a human stepped forward with a price. The last solar-only flies landed on her skin. No one made a single offer until a human saw her true worth and paid. The sign above the docking bay read, "Last Chance Exchanges," though time and corrosion had claimed most of the letters. What remained hung crooked on rusted brackets. The words faded into a dull memory of legitimacy. Zyra Station, once a mining logistics hub orbiting the stripped husk of a dead moon, now served a simpler purpose: offloading anything the core systems didn't want to see. Inside the auction dome, the air was heavy with heat and disuse. The faint hiss of faulty oxygen filters warred with the buzz of exposed plasma welds overhead. Patchwork glass let in the distant burn of a dying sun, its light fractured into pale shafts across the cracked floor. The scent was a suffocating blend of scorched wiring, sweat, oil, and the faint copper tang of old blood. Morgan adjusted the strap of his satchel, his long coat brushing the edge of a scorched bench, as he stepped past a cluster of traders gnawing on skewered meat. His boots clicked against warped plating. The auction was ending. Most of the cages had been cleared, vacant now, their former occupants loaded into transports, sold off for parts or worse. Then he saw her. She was barely visible, in the shadows at the far end of the dome, chained to a floor ring bolt as if even the cage wasn't worth fully locking anymore. Her knees were pulled to her chest, shoulders hunched, her long white hair tangled and stuck to her blue-gray skin. Flies circled lazily around her, landing undisturbed on the oozing wounds that marred her back. No one even looked at her. Not anymore. And yet Morgan froze mid-step. There was not a signal, not a sound. Something older, instinctive. His eyes locked on the mark seared into her shoulder, partially obscured by grime and blood, but unmistakable in form. A curved glyph. Delicate, as a crescent, interlaced with lines like a falling star. Solar, a dialect so old no living AI could translate it. Banned, forgotten, erased. His pulse kicked hard against his ribs. The auctioneer caught his gaze and snorted. "Still here, Professor? There's nothing left worth your kind of credits." Morgan didn't answer. He stepped toward the cage, each footfall echoing louder in his chest than in the room. "She's unsellable," the man continued, gesturing with a half-smoked stim stick. "Falsified logs, no species match, doesn't speak, barely breathes. Flies love her, though." The other traders chuckled. One leaned back, eyeing Morgan with a smirk. "You going to take her home and archive her, scholar? Frame her next to your fossils?" He ignored them. Up close now, the damage was worse. Her skin was cracked, mottled like stone, as if she'd once glowed and had that glow scorched out. The wounds on her back weren't just cuts. They were layered over older scars, as if she'd been branded and rebranded over and over again. A cruel palimpsest. She didn't look at him, didn't flinch when the flies scattered as his shadow crossed her, didn't move at all. For a moment he saw her not as an artifact or a proof of concept, but as someone beyond even recognition, a thing the galaxy had decided no longer mattered. A lost truth, still breathing. "I'll take her," Morgan said quietly. The auctioneer blinked. "You what?" "I'll take her." The traders burst into laughter. One tossed a chicken bone toward the cage. "You know we were just joking, right?" Morgan didn't look away. "Transfer the credits." "You're serious?" The auctioneer scratched the side of his jaw. "She's yours, I guess. Don't blame me if she dies on the way out. Breathing corpse, that one." The transaction pinged, confirmed. The lock on the cage disengaged with a groan like an old grave opening. Morgan stepped inside. She didn't react. Not when he crouched. Not when he placed his coat gently over her shoulders. The fabric fell across her fragile frame, too large but clean and warm. Still nothing. He didn't touch her skin, just sat beside her in silence. The wounds on her back pulsed once, dark and wet. A fly landed near the edge of the brand. He waved it away. From somewhere beneath her curtain of hair a sound escaped, not a word, a breath with weight. Then a whisper, dry, barely formed, but unmistakable. A word in Solar. The last time Morgan had heard that language spoken, It had been reconstructed from broken stone tablets, voices simulated by AI in sterile labs. But now here, the word carried meaning. It had weight. Her lips moved again as if trying to remember how to speak at all. Then she slumped forward. Morgan caught her before her head hit the floor, his arms looping around her almost without thought. Her body was lighter than it should have been. Starvation, nerve damage. He adjusted her weight carefully and stood. Behind him, the traders had returned to their drinks and murmured jokes, but one voice cut through them, low and sharp. "Does this mean we can't have our turn anymore?" Morgan turned his head slightly. He didn't speak, but he memorized that voice. Then he walked out of the auction dome. She didn't stir in his arms. Her breath was shallow, too slow. His pulse kept time for both of them as he carried her through the grim corridors of Zyra Station, past blinking consoles and empty promises. As the station doors hissed shut behind them, he looked down at her face. Long white lashes, skin that shimmered faintly even through grime and bruises. She was no relic, no salvage. She was history the galaxy tried to bury, and Morgan Meyer, exiled academic, discarded historian, hadn't just uncovered a forgotten page. For the first time, he had touched a living story. I whispered, almost to himself as the door to his ship opened. "I didn't buy you to study you. I bought you to save you." She didn't answer, but as the lights of the station faded behind them, a single line haunted him. The Solar left no voice recordings. Their language was erased, their songs silenced before the war even ended. And yet, a moment ago, someone had spoken again. One word, spoken through cracked lips, and she had survived long enough to say it. Morgan held her closer, his jaw set. He didn't yet know who she was, didn't know what the word meant, but he would learn. And this time, no one would silence her again. The door hissed shut behind them with a faint hydraulic sigh, sealing out the filth and noise of Zyra Station. Inside the ship, the air was filtered and clean, though tinged with the faint familiar scent of ink, old textiles, and recycled coolant. An odd kind of comfort Morgan had grown used to. He carried her carefully through the narrow corridor, past rows of storage shelves lined with data pads, fossilized scrolls, and bits of shattered pottery. His ship wasn't a war vessel or a transport hauler. It was a floating archive, part field lab, part mobile sanctuary. It wasn't built for comfort, but it was safe and warm. The woman in his arms made no sound. Her body was still too light, too stiff, like she didn't quite believe she was out of the cage yet. As if any moment the light would shift, the air would change, and she'd be dragged back into darkness. He settled her into the medbay's padded recliner, a salvaged piece from an old exploration craft, worn but functional. Her head lolled to the side. The coat he'd wrapped around her slipped slightly, revealing a dark welt running across her ribs. He winced. Morgan stepped back and activated the low-level diagnostics on the wall. It hummed to life, casting a soft blue glow over her skin. Readings blinked in a quiet pattern. Dehydration, malnutrition, superficial lacerations, decreased neural activity, blood pressure, just barely holding. She wouldn't last another rotation without intervention. He moved quickly and without fanfare. Rehydration gel, synth protein solution, mild to avoid shock, a portable warming pad beneath her spine. Nothing invasive, nothing that might make her feel restrained. The auto-patcher hissed, sealing one of the deeper cuts on her arm. She twitched just slightly but didn't wake. Morgan exhaled slowly, his pulse still high, his thoughts already spiraling toward what he'd done. He'd never rescued anyone before, never bought a living being, never crossed the line between observation and action. But back in that dome, something ancient had stirred in him, not academic, not logical. It was a gut-deep recognition. She wasn't just a remnant. She was the Solar. And something about the way she hadn't begged or looked away, something about the way she simply endured, that had done it. Broken something in him, or maybe rebuilt it. His hand hovered briefly above hers, then stopped. No contact. Not unless she asked. He turned, moved to the small galley, and retrieved a thermal cup of broth. Not too hot, just warm enough to settle in a hollow stomach. When he returned, she had shifted. Her eyes were open, barely, amber, shot through with gold veins, still dull from pain but aware now. Watching. He crouched beside her again, this time setting the cup down within reach. "You're safe," he said softly. "You're not on Zira anymore." She didn't blink. Her gaze stayed, locked on him, unmoving. "I'm Morgan," he added, speaking with the same calm tone he used when addressing ancient ruins. "I'm a historian. I study lost cultures. I saw your mark, the glyph on your shoulder." Still no response, but her fingers twitched once, a small, involuntary motion, like memories stirring beneath the surface. "I'm not here to study you," he clarified. "I didn't buy you to own you." A pause. "I just couldn't leave you there." Nothing in her expression changed, but her breath came in just slightly deeper. He stood again, giving her space. "I'm going to leave the door open," he said. "No locks, no cameras. This is your room now. If you're hungry, the broth's there. If you want help, just call me." He left the medbay door partially open and stepped into the corridor, the weight of what he'd just said pressing down on him. Back in the cockpit, he slumped into the pilot's seat, elbows on knees, staring out at the stars through the viewport. The engines hummed softly beneath his feet, steady, reliable. What the hell had he done? It had been years since anyone called him impulsive. He wasn't a rescuer. He was a man who read ruins and deciphered dialects. But something about her, that brand, that one whispered word in a language no one had spoken aloud in over a century. She'd spoken solar, not mimicked it, spoken it with rhythm, with intent. And now she was lying in his ship, silent and broken, barely breathing. He rubbed a hand across his face, then reached for the recording pad beside him and clicked it on. "Entry 417, he said, voice quieter than usual. "Subject acquired at Zira Auction Dome. Possible solar survivor. Confirmed brand in royal dialect, archaic variant. Language recognition suggests authentic fluency. We'll monitor vitals and behavioral patterns. She has not spoken again since boarding." He stopped the recording, stared at the blinking cursor. "She's more than a subject," he muttered under his breath. Then he stood again. He made himself wait a full hour before returning to the med bay. She hadn't touched the broth, but she was sitting up now, hunched as if she might still bolt at any moment, but awake. Awake and watching him with those cautious gold-flecked eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his tone gentle. "If you don't want me to talk, I won't. Just wanted to check on you." She said nothing, but her gaze flicked to the cup, then back to him. He didn't move, didn't urge her. A long moment passed. Then with hands that shook slightly, she reached for the broth, brought it to her lips. The first sip was small. She paused, waited, then another, and another. Halfway through the cup, her shoulders trembled. She stopped drinking and lowered the cup. Her breath caught. Morgan thought for a second she might be choking, but then saw the wet streak on her cheek. Not choking, crying, silently but fully. He didn't move. She stared at the cup like it had betrayed her, and she looked up at him. Really looked. Not with fear, not with suspicion, with confusion, as if she couldn't quite understand why she was still alive, why no one had given her something warm. Morgan swallowed hard. "You're not alone anymore," he said. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away. Not this time. And that, he knew, was the beginning of something fragile. Something real, something neither of them had expected. Out in the void, his ship sailed quietly between stars. Inside, the silence wasn't empty anymore. Morgan found her standing at the far end of the medbay, spine drawn taut as if waiting to be struck, one hand resting lightly against the curved wall. Her fingers explored it like she didn't trust the surface to stay still. She was still wrapped in his coat, though it hung off her thin frame in loose folds, the sleeves dragging slightly at the ends. Her bare feet stood flat against the polished floor, and for a second she didn't notice he was watching. She wasn't looking for a way out. She was listening. The faint hum of the ship's core engine vibrated through the hull, every whisper of circuitry, every pulse of the life support grid. She seemed to map it all through her body. Morgan didn't move. If he startled her now, he didn't know what she'd do. Then she spoke, quiet, not to him, not even to herself, to the ship. A machine that breathes. Her voice had a rough and used edge to it like broken silk, but the pronunciation was precise, syllables deliberate. And the language wasn't common, not trade, not anything on record. He caught the rhythm immediately. Solar. Morgan stepped forward slowly, just enough to make the floor creak. She turned at the sound. Her expression didn't change. No surprise, no fear, just a weary kind of awareness, as if bracing for whatever came next. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said gently. "I came to check your vitals." "You already did," she answered. He blinked. Her voice was stronger now, though still low and used. There was weight behind it, not because she wanted to speak, but because she decided to. "You knew I was awake, I heard you breathe." Morgan nodded slowly. "I see," she tilted her head. "You always speak like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're brushing dust off your words before using them." A flicker of something passed between them, dry, brittle, but almost humorous. The corner of his mouth lifted. "Bad habit." She turned her gaze back to the wall. "You're not like the others." "I try not to be." She looked at him again, sharper this time. "Then why did you pay for me?" He didn't answer right away. There were too many versions of the truth. He could say it was the glyph, the brand on her shoulder that matched a forbidden dialect he'd once risked his career to prove existed. He could say it was the whispered word she'd spoken in that cage, or the fact that no one else had even looked at her as a person. But none of that was the whole answer. "Because you were being erased," he said finally. "And I've spent my life trying to keep people like you from disappearing." She didn't blink. "Not just your body," he added. "Your language, your history. You said something in Solar when I found you. Do you remember?" She nodded once. "What did it mean?" She took a long moment before answering. "It's a name." "Yours?" "No, a title, for someone who is lost but not gone." He let that settle. "That's poetic. It's who I was supposed to become." "Were you royalty?" he asked gently. A pause then, with no inflection. "Once." It wasn't boastful. It wasn't tragic. Just a shard of something buried under ash. Morgan crossed to the terminal and dimmed the light slightly. She didn't react to the change, but her shoulders dropped half an inch. He noticed. "Would you like something to eat?" he asked. "No." But her voice faltered. He didn't push. "Do you remember your name?" he asked instead. She hesitated, then quietly, "No." Morgan didn't write it down. He didn't record the conversation, he just stood there and nodded. "Would you like to use mine?" he asked. She looked up at him again, this time really seeing him. "You're offering your name to a stranger?" "It's just a name," he said. "But it's a start." He meant it as a bridge. She took it as something more. She didn't say yes, didn't even nod. But she took a step toward him. Just one. And the distance between them shrank by more than meters. Morgan took a slow breath. He gestured toward the corridor. "I'm heading to the galley. You don't have to join me, but there's fresh cloth and water in the hygiene station if you want to. I know what it's for." Her voice cut him off. Not sharp, but decisive. Then she added quieter. "I haven't used one in, I don't know. Take your time." He turned to leave but paused at the threshold. "Some parts of this ship are old," he said. "They creak when they shift, especially when we break orbit. Don't be alarmed. It's not failing. It's just remembering." She said nothing, but he thought he saw her eyes soften. Later, as he sat in the galley nursing a bitter cup of synth coffee, the sound of water running through the pipes echoed faintly overhead. He set the mug down and leaned forward, elbows on the table, staring at the faint reflection of the light above. She was washing, not because she had to, because she chose to. He didn't go to her. He didn't need to. Not yet. For now, the sound of running water was enough, a small declaration of life and somewhere, maybe even of trust. The stars outside turned in patient silence, visible through the narrow pane of the cockpit. Inside, the dimmed lights had settled into their evening cycle, a soft amber glow, calm and low. Morgan sat in the pilot's chair, not piloting, just thinking. His hands were folded in his lap. His eyes drifted occasionally to the console, then to the empty co-pilot's seat beside him, until it wasn't empty anymore. Ceridian stepped inside, barefoot, her presence quiet but steady. Her long white hair hung damp down her back, glimmering faintly against her fresh clothes, soft gray fabric from his emergency stores still too loose on her small frame. She didn't speak. She just looked at the seat, then at him. And when he gave the slightest nod, she sat, not cautiously, not like someone testing a cage, like someone returning to somewhere they weren't sure they'd ever be allowed again. "I remember my name," she said. Morgan turned, his breath catching slightly, not from surprise but from how she said it, not with hesitation, with ownership. "I'm Ceridian of Halvareth," she said. "Daughter of the line singer Kirithel and the reader Valen, last bearer of the House of Breath." The cockpit went still. Morgan had spent his academic life chasing fragments of those names. Valen's glyph had been etched into the floor of a ruined dome on Angus Prime. Kirithel's name appeared once in a disputed archival fragment, dismissed as poetic metaphor. But here they were, real, spoken aloud by the only person left who could say them with memory in her voice. "Halvareth," he said slowly. "That city was never found, not even a single wall stone." "Because it wasn't made of stone," she replied. "It was built into the living cliffside of Iral's spine. Our walls were grown, not carved. Our homes sang when the wind passed through them." She looked toward the window. Her voice lost some of its edge, softened into something almost reverent. "You could stand on a balcony and feel the breath of the planet in your ribs. That was the rhythm our language followed. Not breath against teeth like yours. Ours flowed from diaphragm, throat, then air, like tide, like heat,